Have you noticed your Amazon order from China taking longer to arrive or the price suddenly rising? The answer could lie in disruptions along the Suez Canal and the Red Sea, where about 15% of global trade flows. Recent attacks by Yemen's Houthi militants have turned these waters into a high-risk zone, causing shipping delays and skyrocketing costs. In fact, the cost of insuring a ship through the Red Sea has more than doubled since September, with premiums jumping from 0.7% to as high as 2% of a vessel's value. With over 70 attacks since November 2023, 2 ships sunk, another seized and at least 3 seafarers killed, shipping companies are now rerouting their vessels around the Cape of Good Hope, adding an extra 10 days to their journeys. You can probably imagine the impact on businesses relying on fast deliveries and tight inventories. The increased risks have pushed some insurers to pause coverage altogether, making it clear that relying on a single trade route has its pitfalls. But could a new alternative reshape global commerce, offer a way out of this mess, and totally reshape the map of the Middle East?
Weapons held high and massing in the thousands, anger and powerful symbolism on the streets of Yemen's capital.
Houthi rebels from Yemen were seen storming a cargo ship in the Red Sea.
Yemen's Houthi rebels say they've attacked another cargo ship in the Red Sea.
The Houthis in Yemen launching more ballistic and cruise missiles which are harder to defend against.
The Red Sea has long been a vital artery for global trade, connecting the Suez Canal in the north to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in the south. It's one of the world's main maritime choke points, with around 14% of global maritime trade and around 30% of containerized trade flowing through these waters. In 2023 alone, 17.5% of the world's grain, 5.6% of its crude oil, and a staggering 25% of global jet fuel passed through the Suez Canal. But did you know this region's importance to trade goes back thousands of years? The idea of using these waterways to move goods isn't new. As far back as 1850 BCE, the Egyptians dug the Canal of the Pharaohs, linking the Nile Delta to the Red Sea. Over the centuries, empires like the Romans and early Arabs extended, abandoned, and reopened it, each recognizing the strategic value of controlling these vital trade routes. European control of the Suez Canal kicked off in the late 1700s, when Napoleon's expedition to Egypt sparked the first serious plan to connect the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. Napoleon didn't quite finish the job, but he definitely laid the groundwork for something big. Fast forward to 1854, when French diplomat Ferdinand de Lesseps took the lead, and by 1869, the Suez Canal was officially open for business. This was a total game changer for maritime commerce, slashing the need for the long, expensive trip around Africa. Suddenly, the Mediterranean was directly connected to the Indian Ocean, making the Suez a key artery for commerce. But French control didn't last long. By 1875, Britain bought a 44% stake, and the canal came under joint French-British control. In 1888, the Constantinople International Convention was signed, guaranteeing free passage through the canal for all nations, even during war. Simple enough, right? Not quite. Things changed completely in 1956, when Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, declaring it an Egyptian asset. This move sparked the infamous Suez Crisis. The Suez Crisis was a huge turning point in global geopolitics. In 1956, the UK, France, and Israel teamed up for a military intervention to regain control and oust Nasser. Contrary to the expectations of the trio, pressure from both the US and the Soviet Union forced them to back down, marking the beginning of the end for British and French influence in the region. For Israel, the Suez Canal had been a headache fever since. After the 1948 Arab-Israeli conflict, Egypt blocked Israeli ships, cutting off vital trade routes to East Africa and Asia and limiting their access to oil from the Gulf.
The Suez Canal, never far from the news in its 87 years of history, hits the headlines like a bombshell, when, without a hint of warning, Egypt's Premier, Colonel Nasser, announces that his country is taking it over.
Things got worse in 1967 during the Six-Day War, when Egypt closed the canal entirely, keeping it shut for an unprecedented 8 years. This wasn't just an issue for Israel. Global trade took a massive hit too. That brings us to Israel's bold countermove, the proposed Ben-Gurion Canal. This project, nearly one-third longer than the 193.9-kilometer Suez Canal, aims to bypass the Suez entirely by carving out a new route through Israeli territory. Connecting Eilat on the Red Sea to Ashkelon on the Mediterranean, it offers Israel the chance to break free from Egypt's control and the political leverage of the Suez. Could this canal be a game changer? Definitely, the Ben-Gurion Canal wouldn't just help Israel dodge the congestion of the Suez, it could give the country a serious boost in global trade, making it a major player on the world stage. But the impact goes beyond just trade. If this canal becomes a reality, it could drastically cut Egypt's influence over global shipping routes. The Suez Canal handles about 12% of the world's trade, but its history of closures and disruptions has shown just how fragile it can be. The Ben-Gurion Canal could be a diplomatic game-changer too. By connecting Israel more deeply into the Abraham Accords and linking up with Saudi Arabia's futuristic city Neom, this project could reshape regional alliances in a big way. Its relevance is growing fast, especially as new trade routes like the UK-India infrastructure bridge build stronger connections across the Gulf, Israel, and Europe. With tensions rising, whether it's the conflict in Gaza or attacks on vessels in the Red Sea, the need for alternative shipping routes is more pressing than ever.
The signing and exchange of agreements between the City of London and India's Niti Aayog, which witnessed the launch of the UK-India Infrastructure Finance Bridge. This bridge will make global infrastructure companies aware of India and its thirst for growth.
And let's not forget the chaos caused by the Ever Given when it blocked the Suez Canal. Clearly, a backup might be needed. Shifting global dynamics, from the pandemic to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, have made diversifying trade routes a top priority for Western nations. The obstacles that once stalled the Ben-Gurion Canal, like US opposition and logistical challenges, are now looking more manageable, sparking renewed interest in the project. With tensions heating up across the Middle East, this could be the perfect time to bring the canal back into play. For neighboring Egypt, however, the idea of the Ben-Gurion Canal is like a bad dream. The country relies heavily on the Suez Canal for its economic survival, with the canal and tourism being its two biggest moneymakers. But Suez Canal revenues have already taken a huge hit in 2024, down 40% due to geopolitical tensions and attacks on ships by groups like Yemen's Houthis. With ship traffic dropping 30%, the impact on Egypt's economy is serious, and the prospect of a competing canal would only make things worse. To give you an idea of how important the canal is, in 2021, over 20,000 ships passed through, generating around $8 billion in revenue by 2022. By mid-2023, the Suez Canal was raking in a record $9.4 billion. But if Israel's Ben-Gurion Canal gets built, Egypt could see much of that traffic and money and geopolitical clout disappear. With Egypt already struggling economically, this kind of competition could make it even harder for the country to bounce back, reducing its influence over key global shipping routes.
Egypt's economic crisis has been going on for years, with soaring inflation rates and a severe shortage of foreign currency. And the gap between official and black market rates has been huge. Many Egyptians say the rising cost of living is a nightmare.
Egypt is already grappling with massive foreign debt and a government borrowing so heavily that even foreign creditors are backing off, driving up deficits and worsening inflation. Add to this a population of 106 million, where around 60% of citizens are estimated to live below or near the poverty line. President Sisi has already warned that Egypt's population has grown too fast, causing water scarcity, overcrowded schools and hospitals, and a lack of job opportunities. A challenge like the Ben-Gurion Canal could be the tipping point in a country already stretched thin. The government tried to fix things by raising the prices of subsidized goods, but inflation quickly ate up any gains. Foreign investment outside of oil and gas is minimal. Remittances have dropped by 30%, and while the Suez Canal and tourism are still bringing in some cash, the conflict in Gaza is clouding Egypt's tourism outlook. The Egyptian pound has also been through the ringer. Since March 2022, it's lost about half its value, fueling record inflation of 38% in September. Debt repayment is also a huge issue, with $42 billion due in 2024 alone. With around 60% of Egyptians near or below the poverty line, many who can are looking for jobs abroad. Despite all this, President Sisi has been splurging on flashy infrastructure projects, like a $58 billion new capital in the desert and boosting military imports, making Egypt the third largest arms importer in the world. Western and Gulf allies have thrown billions Egypt's way, but they're now looking for returns on their investments, which means fewer lifelines. The IMF is in talks to help, but Egypt has some reforms to tackle before more aid flows in, meaning the country has a long way to go before being out of the woods. At the end of the day, the Red Sea is a high-stakes arena, a real bad neighborhood packed with geopolitical drama, regional rivalries, and Machiavellian maneuvers that would put any spy thriller to shame. While piracy has largely been handled, the region is now dominated by proxy wars and power plays, especially with Iran and Saudi Arabia duking it out in Yemen. Houthis are launching missiles and drones, turning the once congested shipping lane into a ghost town. But it's not just Yemen. The entire region is a battlefield for influence. Gulf states are pouring money into military bases in places like Sudan and Somalia, while Egypt and Ethiopia clash over the GERD project. It's a tinderbox that could ignite at any time. Meanwhile, Gaza will also need to be peaceful before construction on the canal can begin. So, the proposed Ben-Gurion Canal is a bold step towards reshaping the region's power dynamics, in a world where control over key trade routes can make or break a nation's influence. By bypassing the Suez and offering a new, efficient route through Israel, this project has the potential to transform global trade and shift the balance of power in the Middle East. However, it's this wider regional instability that could threaten the project's viability even before the ink is dry on the construction plans. But what do you think? Could the Ben-Gurion Canal really challenge the Suez Canal's dominance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this dive into the geopolitics of global trade, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more videos like this. Thanks for watching.